Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Bombs. I'm Craig,
I'm Holden.
I'm Carson.
and we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. President Trump has swept the United States and won the presidency of the United States. He will be inaugurated on January 20th, 2025. I am thrilled. My friends here are not. How are we feeling?
Well, we'll talk about the negative ramifications for politics as a whole in a second. I just want to say this was shockingly decisive. I mean, obviously Trump did not win any states, that were like historically blue. He only won the swing states. However, he only lost New York by 11. He lost Illinois by 8. I believe Illinois was won by 19 points in 2020. He lost New Jersey by 5. And so, I mean, all of these different states that have like huge cities, it's clear the cities swung right in this election. Philadelphia was experiencing record high turnout, and everybody thought, before the election, oh, this is great for Dems. No, it was not, because Philadelphia also went right. And so overall, I think very decisive victory. It very much so shows that the Trump campaign, not only just because of the economy, but also because of the rhetoric and I think the populism that was espoused, decisively won this election.
Now, I could be wrong, but regarding turnout in Philadelphia, wasn't that down from 2020?
I'm not 100% sure, but I remembered that they were like at very high levels compared to, or like almost at the 2020 levels, at like earlier in the election day. So I'm like, I think around 11 they were at like 40 or 50% of 2020 turnout. But I could be wrong. Regardless, there was, a lot of talking of turnout, and it's very clear that turnout, despite the fact that all of the Midwestern battlegrounds, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, they all were decided by 2 points or less. It's very clear that Trump, he struck a nerve in this election. Something changed because, and I think that also comes down to Latinos, but, California was a 29-point state for Biden in 2020. And we don't have all of the vote there, but Kamala Harris is only leading by 17. So something shifted, and it shifted dramatically this election that could not have been predicted, not even the 2022 midterms, which were good for Democrats. Nothing could have predicted what took the nation by storm this election.
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise given that a lot of the polls were, say, predicting a Trump win in the Electoral College, but a Trump loss in the popular vote, perhaps a Harris +1 popular vote win. So for Trump to win the popular vote and the electoral vote, definitely astounding and not what many pollsters had showing on their radar. Additionally, you had record turnout in the rural counties, so that really helped Trump. And I think you also had win for Trump in Latino men. He was able to pull off that demographic as well as white men and white women. So that certainly helped him get across the finish line and excel.
I will say white women actually were one of the demographics that went down from 2020. In 2020, he won them by 9. In 2024, he only won them by 5. So that was one of the leftward shifting demographics. But so many other demographics shifted rightward that it didn't even matter.
Interesting. And I think abortion definitely played a role in that. The Dobbs decision, I support that, but certainly had an impact on that demographic. And you look at the abortion referendum results in, say, Arizona passed, several states passed. Florida, fortunately, rejected Amendment 4, which was for abortion. However, it got the majority of the vote, but it needed 60% to pass. So it didn't get the threshold.
Well, what can I say? I was right. I predicted a Trump victory, and that's what happened. And that's what I thought. Inflation has been horrible, and it's not really being accounted for in the government statistics the way it's actually being felt by many Americans when it comes to their own individual unique basket of goods that they're buying. So that, I think, had a huge impact on people's voting decision this time, particularly lower income communities and demographics. Those people turned out much higher for Trump this time And I think that's a major reason why, because inflation is a tax that hits lower income people the hardest. So, of course, Trump is largely responsible for it, but the voters are going to shift blame to whomever was in office at the time that the prices started to rise because of inflation. Remember, inflation is not prices rising, that is prices rising. You can't inflate a price. You can inflate the money supply. The money supply is what's inflated. The expansion of the money supply and credit is actually inflation.
And I want to say these past like 2-3 years of election cycles all across the world have been very bad for incumbent parties. The 2022 midterms were kind of a shock, and the only other election I can think of was the elections in France, where the liberals there and the kind of formed a coalition with the far left and won a consensus majority of seats. That's the only one. I mean, the Labour Party, for instance, won decisively earlier this year in the UK. It is a bad time to be an incumbent party, and I think this election really showed that. I obviously do not think that Trump on policy is going to be much better, if even better at all, on the causes of inflation. We all know that Trump spent so much, I mean, an absurd amount of money during the COVID years, and so. Or just 2020 even, because he was only president for one of them. And, Biden only continued that. And obviously, this is just a problem in general you're seeing with politics. Everything is shifting towards populism. And in my opinion, I think that Kamala Harris, while in policy was very populist, in actual rhetoric, that's kind of where she fell short. And that's why I think Trump won, in part, is because of that populist rhetoric. He was espousing this, anti-immigrant, we're going to work for you. We want to make sure that American citizens are getting the benefit of any spending we make, and all of this different thing, all these different stuff. The no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, a lot of the immigration rhetoric. It was all focused on populism and populist rhetoric. And this country is shifting, and it does worry me. I think Bernie Sanders released a statement that, sadly, I find to be true about the Democratic Party, which is that, he's saying, and I don't agree with the general sentiment, which is that when the Democratic Party abandons working people will abandon the Democratic Party. But I think overall, he's right, that if the Democrats had run a more populist campaign, they might have done better. And it just shows that politics is shifting in a very populist direction for the worst.
Harris definitely made a lot of mistakes, like not going on the Rogan interview. The Fox News interview with Bret Baier was a total flop. She really was afraid to go in front of the press, and I think that definitely hurt her with the swing voters and just shows she's not ready for prime time. She was trying to hide and hope that she could eke out a victory, and it didn't pay off. She wasn't able to do it.
I just think overall, I would just say, the fact of the matter is, you're going to see, and at least from my analysis right now, I could be totally wrong. The Democrats could put up Josh Shapiro in 2028, all right? But I would be surprised if you see anyone to the right of AOC nominated as the candidate in 2024, right now, or 2028. Right now, it's looking like, the competition, I'm thinking like the three major players might be Josh Shapiro, Pete Buttigieg, and AOC. And obviously, the Republicans already have their candidate in J.D. Vance, right? Clearly, unless something goes different in the primary, it's very clear that J.D. Vance is the inheritor of the Republican Party. And you just have to take this moment to recognize this country is shifting in a populist direction, shifting in a collectivist direction. America, the bastion of individualism and individual liberty, a country that was founded on a desire to find religious freedom, is today shifting away from those values in a similar way to when we did it in the 1930s with FDR. And I'm just going to say it. It's frightening. It's terrible for America, for American capitalism, for the entire world, really. You've already seen this happen in Canada and in Western Europe with their universal health care and all of that. You're seeing it happen in America now, and it's no matter which party gains control, which party keeps winning, both of them might as well be the same on economic issues, and it's disheartening to say the least.
Interesting. I think that we're going to see a strong contrast between the two. I think that you've really got the Democrats going further and further left on economics. I think that the Trump team this time around is more free market oriented, and that's a promising sign for real change, regulatory reform tax cuts, etc. So I'm optimistic. We'll definitely have to see what happens there because he's going to need the support of Congress for a lot of these items, and they aren't necessarily as on board with President Trump's agenda than others. So definitely a contrast there.
The one thing I will say, just like, I just have to reject that because someone like J.D. Vance has praised the economics of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Lena Khan. You know, I seriously can't imagine them going in a free market direction when Trump picked someone like that to be his running mate, someone like that to be the inheritor of his Republican Party. I just have to disagree with you there.
Okay. Yeah, no, gotcha. I think that you look at, for example, the deregulatory plan, looking to dismantle different government departments, the tax cuts, and I think that that will really open up the economy and help us have a freer market.
If he goes through with it, certainly. I don't see it happening. But
When he was president,
I think a lot of I think a lot of what like the Trump team proposes when it comes to deregulation, it's all at this like vague attack on the deep state, and it's entirely politically motivated because the bureaucrats are very liberal. I think if the bureaucrats all agreed with Trump, there would be no deregulation plan. There'd be no plan to disassemble the government, and it's entirely like Trump does not believe on principle that having all these bureaucratic agencies and that kind of thing is bad. He believes it's bad because they oppose his agenda, and overall, I do not, even if he is to dismantle a lot of these things, I'll give him credit where credit is due, but I don't see it happening. And when it does happen, I think it's going to be a lot more politically motivated than it is ideologically and, actually motivated on a desire to reduce the size of government.
Interesting. Though, when he was president last time regarding the deregulation, his goal was to eliminate 2 regulations for every one created, and he was able to exceed that. So even though you might say have a willingness to have a staff that's supportive of your agenda, which I think is essential, you can't really get what you want done without having dedicated staff for you. If you've got the deep state fighting every move of yours, then it's going to be a lot harder to get what you want done. But on that note, I think that there's certainly a strong willingness to deregulate the economy.
Yeah, I just Craig, come on, man, bro. You got to wake up. It's not happening. It's only you're gonna have a half-hearted approach at cutting regulations. If you look at Trump's first term, it was a half-hearted approach at deregulating the economy. We still had millions of regulations. We still had he never cut. Name one government department that Donald Trump abolished in his first term.
None. But
And he said he would drain the swamp. Was the swamp bigger whenever he left, or in a Republican Congress? Was it bigger, or did it grow or not?
with COVID, it grew.
But before COVID, was it growing?
No, I think that he was able to replace a lot of personnel. He wasn't able to do everything that he wanted, but I think now as he's said, he knows better who he wants on his team, who is on his team versus last time.
But government jobs grew before COVID. We had more government jobs. And who pays for government jobs? We do.
Right, but we have to remember that he's not able to make the budget itself. Congress has that power.
Right, but name one major spending bill that he vetoed. One. I just asked for one. Not one major spending bill did Donald Trump veto. So Trump was clearly for the spending. In fact, he bragged about spending our own money. I mean, Craig, I want to be in your. I want to deregulate. It would be amazing. We'd be so much more productive. Everybody would be a lot freer. The economy would prosper. But it's just a fantasy. As far as I can tell. Now, I'd like to be more optimistic, but it's going to cause, yeah.
And I just want to jump in because also Trump's plan is not to gut the bureaucracy. His plan is to replace every member of the bureaucracy with someone who's exclusively loyal to him.
That's right.
I don't think this is a problem, mainly because it's the same thing the Democrats have done.
Exactly.
Everyone in the federal bureaucracies is pretty liberal. So it's not like he's taking over the government, just like you guys have done.
Exactly.
But he's also not cutting it. He's just replacing everyone there with people who are exclusively loyal to him.
And he doesn't care if you're loyal to the Constitution or he doesn't even know what it means. What he hasn't read it, most likely. He just cares if you're loyal to him. Well, Mike Pence on January 6th, he did not he told him not to certify the election. He doesn't care if it's constitutional or not. He just cares about, are you loyal to Trump? That's all he cares about. And to that, he's unfit for public office immediately.
You know, I think that you look at January 6th, certainly Pence had the power to reject those electors. He could have done it, and that's why they changed the Electoral Count Act. But what's done is done, and, you know, we're going to have a new president come January 20th. But certainly he would have been well within his power to do that, and that's why they changed the law.
Right, but even though that's his power, it's a power that was only given to the vice president because the framers wanted a sort of check. It was not meant to be abused in the way that Trump asked Pence to abuse it on January 6, 2020.
Well, when you have a rigged election, I think it's your duty to oppose it. But you have a moral
so why was
obligation.
2020 rigged and not 2024?
Why wouldn't they rig this election?
Yeah,
because we were successful with the lawsuits. We were able to shut down a lot of
all
their
of those
fraud.
lawsuits were thrown out the window. All of the judges
I'm
looked
talking
at the
about
lawsuits.
2024. 2024,
okay.
like, for example, in Pennsylvania, we had Republican poll watchers who were not allowed in the buildings to watch the vote count. And the RNC very quickly sued and got an injunction, was able to have those poll watchers come in. So a lot of cases where we had lawsuits that prevailed this time around, and that's the difference. Plus, we didn't have the mass mail-in ballots, and we also changed election laws in many states, like
Craig,
Georgia.
I'm gonna be honest with you. When you look at the actual numbers at the end of 2024 and you compare them to the raw vote totals at the end of 2020, 2024 is not going to be that steep of a jump down from 2020. It's not. And especially considering you had 10 million people die from COVID, it's not going to be that much of a jump down. And realistically, all of the arguments for election fraud in 2020 are predicated on this idea that Democrats created voters out of thin air, dead people voted, illegal aliens voted, all of that stuff. And so, objectively, if you look at the numbers, and at least this is my prediction because we still need half of the vote from California, I'm thinking more than likely Trump will win the popular vote by 1.5. It'll be a lot of the same people that voted in 2020 that voted in 2024, and it's just that they swung right. Overall, the results of this election are just disheartening overall, across the board. I don't know if I've already mentioned this yet, but Missouri passed their minimum wage amendment referendum by 14% in deep red Missouri. And this is part of the reason why I'm saying that populism is a winning message, is because if Missouri, a deep red state, is able to pass a minimum wage amendment, that would not have happened 6 years ago. That would not have happened 8 years ago.
Yeah.
This is a new wave of politics ushered in by President Trump, by J.D. Vance, by Bernie Sanders. I mean, these people are incredibly populist, and they want to bring our country in a more fiscally liberal direction in different ways. Obviously, Trump and Vance coming up from a more nationalist perspective. Sanders clearly comes from a democratic socialist perspective. And I think you're going to see the Democratic Party go more in the direction of Bernie Sanders because they can't keep losing. They're going to keep losing if they keep nominating candidates who are like, I'm like a Republican, but not really. And I saw this one post, and it's like Harris is going to be really happy because they're going to have a lot of Republicans in the cabinet because she kept talking about nominating a Republican. They're going to make the differences starker, except they're both going to be populist. They're both going to be these next two candidates. If Vance is at the top of the Republican ticket, he will be the least conservative Republican candidate. I mean, I would have to think in a long time. And the same goes for whoever the Democrats are going to put up, because I imagine it's not going to be someone like Josh Shapiro. They're not going to pivot to the right again. I think they're definitely going to pivot to the left. You're going to see a very far left candidate and a very far right candidate, and both of them are going to agree, because horseshoe theory, we all know it, on economics. And
yes,
it's just terrible for the country. It's terrible for liberty. It's terrible for individualism. It's terrible for America as a whole. We're the last bastion of free market capitalism in the world. and I'm
Yeah,
worried.
Bernie Sanders and the people that you mentioned, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, they all support minimum wage laws. They all support antitrust laws. They all want to break up big companies. They all hate capitalism, and it needs to stop. It's horrible. And Missouri, really? Missouri is like that red of a state is voting that far in favor of a minimum wage law. We are in for some bad
And they
things.
also, just to be clear, Missouri also passed their abortion amendment. So I don't know that this election is even a referendum on the politics of the voters. I think it's a referendum on which side was able to rhetorically convince them
Right.
that they're going to be like the solution. They're going to end inflation. You know, literally one of Trump's, I think, 19 proposals was that we're just going to end inflation. He doesn't like say actually, you know, and I'm sure there's plenty of things you could do to bring down inflation. Part of the problem is what Trump did to bring it up in the first place. But
Yeah, I could go on about Trump and what's going to happen, but I promise you, inflation, actually, M2 has actually contracted the last 2 years, so we've actually had deflation, but Trump is going to inflate the money supply to an insane degree, or the monetary policy of the Fed will do that. He wants to essentially plan monetary policy himself. And, you know, if he gets in there, he's going to want to print a bunch of money because the good effects come in the beginning. It's like a high effect, right? You print a bunch of money and you feel really good. That's what Trump is going to want to do to goose up the economy to make himself look better politically. And that's why being a politician with the short term is, of course, partially a horrible thing, because you look out for the short term and not the long term. But there's a lot of implications.
But could you imagine being stuck with a politician for 10 years? Like, if someone you don't like wins, right? Like, if you want a libertarian-focused mindset and a socialist wins, what do you do for 10 years?
Well, you don't want morons voting for socialism. If people understand economics, they're not going to vote for socialists. I mean, Friedrich Hayek has a quote about it. He says, anybody who understands, it's something along the lines of, anybody who understands economics is not a socialist. It's like impossible. If you understand economics, you're not going to be a socialist. So people who only people who understand economics should be a prerequisite for voting. There should be other qualifications, but that's one of them. So the socialists won't win. It would be an amazing thing.
It's a completely separate topic for a separate, conversation. I will just say overall, I feel like this election has been the peak example of the American people being like in front of them. We've been dangled a shiny medal, and it's just about whoever has the shiniest medal to dangle for us.
Right.
And very clearly, the Democrats did not have the shinier medal, but they will. They can pull it up. In the 2028 presidential debate, you're going to have AOC and J.D. Vance debating on who's better for a higher minimum wage. You're going to have them debating on who is going to make it so grocery stores can't charge certain prices better. You know, they're who's going to attack
price controls on corn? No, I'm going to put price controls on beef. No, that's what 2028 is going to look like.
Yeah, and it's, overall, it's disheartening, and I can't think of even if what you're saying about Trump is right, and he's going to be this excellent force for deregulation, and he's going to be a free market capitalist, and we're just not seeing it right. Okay, I'll give you that. What happens then when J.D. Vance comes into power, and this man who has openly praised the economics of Bernie Sanders, Lena Khan, and Elizabeth Warren comes into power? Is he just going to suddenly change? He's openly said he's not convinced by the politics and the economics of people like Ron Paul.
Right.
I think he's swinging in a more free market direction. He was elected on the Trump ticket, so I don't know. We'll see how Vance operates, but I think that he's going to take the lead from Trump, and I think that Trump is going to operate in a free market direction. Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 p.m. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.